And when we physicists look at a mysterious object, the first thing we try to do is to create a model of this object in space. And then we hit the play button and run it forward in time. This is how Newton was able to come up with the theory of gravity. This is how Einstein came up with relativity. So I tried to use this in terms of the human brain and evolution. So what I'm saying is I have a new theory of consciousness based on evolution. And that is, consciousness is the number of feedback loops required to create a model of your position in space with relationship to other organisms and finally in relationship to time. So think of the consciousness of a thermostat.
Love in the City, an erotic romance novel by Heather Hall. Love in the City, she thought she met the man of her dreams, but is he too good to be true? Georgios Tsarkopoulos is the sexy, drop-dead gorgeous CEO of his family's Fortune 500 company. A chance encounter with Annabelle Parker is the catalyst to a flirtatious cat and mouse game between them. On the surface, he is her dream man and more. However, shady rumors surround his business. Women throw themselves at him, and she fears he isn't telling her everything. Giorgio appears to only have eyes for Annabelle, but she can't believe a young, wealthy, incredibly handsome and successful businessman like him could hold more than a passing interest in her, an average girl. She tries not to be another notch on his bedpost, but that's getting harder with each passing day. Annabelle tries to temper the flames of passion, but they only grow hotter. Is she in over her head, and will he break her heart for good? The love series, HEA slow burn erotic romance novels that are equal parts sweet and sexy, with a hint of suspense. Upcoming titles include Love and Camouflage, Love and Temptation, Love and Overdrive, and many more. Disclaimer, this book is intended for mature readers 18 plus, and is not suitable for younger readers due to adult and sexual situations. This book is a work of fiction. Name, characters, places, and incidents are products of the author's imagination, excluding references to actual historical figures and events, or are used fictitiously and should not be construed as real. Any resemblance to actual events or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Love in the City. Copyright 2013 by Heather Hall. All rights reserved. Published in the United States of America. No part of this book may be used or reproduced in any manner whatsoever without the written permission, except in the case of brief quotations embodied in critical articles and reviews. 4. Information address, h.hallromance@gmail.com. ASIN, B00EW6QX0E. First edition published by Eros Romance Publications, September 2013. Hall, H. Love in the City, a novel / Heather Hall. To contact Heather Hall. Email, h.hallromance@gmail.com. Twitter, https://twitter.com/hhallromance. Goodreads. Editing by Andrea Anesi. http://www.anesiindexing.com. Dedication. For my fellow hopeless romantics. Acknowledgements. Thanks to my soulmate, you always know how to inspire and support me through all of the wild times we share. Thanks very much to my editor, Andrea Anesi, for helping me to polish this book. All a girl really wants is for one guy to prove to her that they are not all the same. Marilyn Monroe. Table of Contents. Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Chapter 5. Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Chapter 8. Chapter 9. Chapter 10. Chapter 11. Chapter 12. Chapter 13. Chapter 14. Chapter 15. Chapter 16. Chapter 17. Chapter 18. Chapter 19. Chapter 20. Chapter 21. Chapter 22. Chapter 23. Chapter 24. Chapter 25. Chapter 26. Chapter 27. Chapter 28. Chapter 29. Chapter 30. Chapter 31. Chapter 32. Chapter 33. Chapter 34. About the author. Chapter 1. Damn it. Annabelle said as she spilled her coffee on her light floral blouse. She hadn't seen the crack in the sidewalk as she was juggling her bags and coffee cup, trying to keep up with the foot traffic. Just great. I hate. Mondays, she mumbled to herself as people hurried past her on their way to work on this bright, sunny day. She silently scolded herself for trying to cram a last-minute errand in before work. She carried on as she reached into her bag to pull out a napkin. She tried to wipe the coffee off, but only succeeded in rubbing it in further. Not looking up from tending to the stain, she bumped into a man. Hard. Ouch, she exclaimed, but then realized she had spilled more coffee. This time on him. Oh no, I'm so sorry. Automatically she reached out with her napkin, already half-stained with coffee, to wipe the coffee off of his suit sleeve. The man intercepted her hand. She looked up, expecting to see a disapproving frown and to be chastised for not watching where she was going by a busy, impatient New Yorker. Instead, she saw a warm smile. He took his reflective aviator sunglasses off to reveal piercing blue eyes, which were framed by thick lashes. His dark, wavy hair had what looked like an undone, messy look, but purposely styled. She inhaled sharply. He was drop-dead gorgeous. Her mind went blank. I tried to dodge you, he said, but you were kind of careening down the sidewalk. His deep, rich voice was kind, and he had a trace of humor in his expression. Annabelle was momentarily stunned as she took in the face of the man who held her hand. He had to be over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and an exotic-looking complexion. He had high cheekbones and wide-set eyes. His teeth were white and straight, and he had luscious, full lips. He was sexy as hell. Are you okay? He asked, still holding her hand gently. She realized she was just standing there staring at him wide-eyed. She turned several shades of red. Yes, I am sorry. I didn't mean to. I should get going. She was even more embarrassed now that she was so flustered. He was going to think she was an idiot. She had to go before she embarrassed herself even further. She went to pull her hand away, and instead dropped the coffee cup on the sidewalk. The lid popped off and the coffee spilled all over his shoes and hers. Okay, he said, laughing and taking a step back. I'm getting a coffee. Bath this morning. Oh no, I am so sorry, again. She thought she would die on the spot. fumbled through her bag to find more napkins. She always carried a pile of them for spills. Kind of like moms do, but she didn't have kids. She hoped one day she would, but her prospects hadn't looked too promising. He laughed again. Really, he said, his voice deep and gentle, it's fine. I can clean up at my office. That's better than here on the street. Passers-by dressed in expensive suits glanced at them, snickering at the sight of the coffee fiasco. Annabelle was dying of embarrassment. She already felt like she stuck out. Like a sore thumb working in Manhattan. But she had been determined to find a career there. It was her dream. But here she was causing a scene. Maybe she'd never fit in, she thought. Okay, again, I am so. He cut her off, no more apologies. It was a simple accident. He grinned at her, the amusement sparkling in his intensely blue eyes. Listen, my office is right in there, he said as he pointed to the gleaming skyscraper they stood in front of. Giorgio, morning, the young man called out as he waved. The man glanced at Annabelle, then down at their shoes. She saw him try to hide the grin on his face as he turned his head and walked into the shiny building. Giorgio? She thought. Man, even his name is sexy. Her heart was beating fast in her chest. Morning, Bernard, he said. See you upstairs. Annabelle bent down to pick up her coffee cup and lid from the sidewalk. At least getting rid of the evidence would make this less of a spectacle. She tucked her shoulder-length straight auburn hair behind her ears. Giorgio quickly bent down to help her, taking note of the hint of ample cleavage that showed through the V-neck of her floral blouse as she leaned over, and her shapely legs and hips as her skirt sneaked up a little higher. He looked back at her chest. You, have a spot there, he said, pointing at her blouse. She looked down. The big, brown stain was plainly evident on her blouse, right where her nipple would be. Dear God, she thought, can this get any more embarrassing? Yes, she said, I got myself before I got you. She went to try and brush the stain off some more when it dawned on her that she was rubbing her breast in front of a total stranger. Then she also realized how revealing her blouse was at this angle. She stopped suddenly, feeling terribly self-conscious. I'd offer to help you with that, but I think maybe it's something you should do, he said, grinning at her. She gave a nervous giggle and turned even redder. I am a gentleman, he said as he grabbed the coffee cup and lid before she could, as she was trying to balance her big purse and work bag. Allow me, he said. He put them in one hand, which she noticed were big and masculine looking, but well manicured, then held out his other hand to help her up. Thank you, she said. She took it, and he helped her stand up. His hand was warm and strong. It's my pleasure to aid a damsel in distress, he said, then tossed the items into a nearby wastebasket. She then noticed his dark gray suit. It looked expensive and finely tailored. Boy, did she know how to make an impression. Does Coffee Haven make a good brew? He asked. Yes, the best I've found around here, Annabelle replied as she straightened her skirt and blouse out. She was bummed she wouldn't get her cup of coffee this morning. She didn't have time to go back, she was already going to be late for work. She had also lost the $5 that coffee had cost her. Nothing in Manhattan was cheap. We have some good coffee up in my office, he said. Why don't I replace what you lost? She looked up at the building. entranceway. Holy crap, she thought as she read the sign. Tsar Enterprises? Georgiou Tsarkopoulos at your service, he said, giving her a playful half. Bow. A wave of intimidation washed over her as she connected the dots. That was his family's company. She realized he was likely one of the wealthiest men in Manhattan. She found herself backing up. She was even more self-conscious. Now of her modest clothing, shoes and bags, none of it was designer. Then she took note of all the people heading into that building, all dressed to the nines. And then some. She felt very out of place. Oh no, I couldn't, she said, realizing the world he came from. I don't bite, I promise, he said, grinning at her. He held out his hand. She looked at it, so inviting. She bit her lip. I'd love to, but I really need to get going. I'm going to be late for work. She was completely flustered as she brushed her flyaway hair out of her face. His face showed disappointment. Perhaps another time, he said. Nodding. Call me here if you'd like to come by for that replacement coffee. I'm easy to find. Sure, she said, gazing into his blue eyes, which felt like they were immobilizing her. Wow, she thought, I could get lost in those. Another time. She broke her gaze and straightened her bags on her shoulders. Bye. She turned around to leave. He took note of a shapely bottom and smiled. He was instantly charmed by her slightly awkward but adorable mannerisms. What's your name? He called after her. She turned back, taking in all 6+ feet of him, standing there with confidence. She blushed again. Annabelle. She turned and left, walking away. Slowly. She didn't want to, but she felt compelled to. Pretty name, he whispered. Pretty girl. She turned back around. He still stood there watching her, admiring her curvy figure. He waved. See you again, Annabelle. She smiled and waved, feeling shy and out of place. Bye. She kept walking, a huge grin spreading across her face. Her temperature had spiked and she felt an electric buzz going through her. What an Adonis, she thought. Then she mentally kicked herself. Only in my dreams. Unbeknownst to her, he kept watching her until she crossed over a couple of blocks and then disappeared out of his sight.
I believe that even a lowly thermostat has one unit of consciousness. That is, it senses the temperature around it. And then we have a flower. A flower has maybe 10 units of consciousness. It has to understand the temperature, the weather, humidity, where gravity is pointing. And then finally we go to the reptilian brain, which I call level 1 consciousness. And reptiles basically have a very good understanding of their position in space, especially because they have to lunge out and